So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Right Aligned with Chris from Studio Republic in Southampton. Chris, as we're getting going, if it's okay with you, can you take us back to, as far back as you want to, really, through education and early stage roles, and just lead us through those that early part of your career?
Absolutely, back in the midst of time. Kind of education-wise, I was not a good university student, shall we say. So I enjoyed the student life more than the actual doing any work. So I quickly realised that wasn't the route for me, and kind of dropped out unceremoniously, and ended up just finding roles that I could do with some sort of technical skills that I did have. So I ended up working at a printers, doing kind of reprographics and a bit of digital there. Got quite into that, learnt a load, moved on doing art working in-house at B&Q, so doing really fast-paced point of sale artwork. Moved on from there into an ad agency where again I was an art worker, but at the time there was this shiny new thing called the internet that businesses were starting to get onto, and the agency I was with were outsourcing all of that, but I soon realized that actually we could in-house it if I learnt a few skills, taught myself, and it kind of blossomed from there. So that was back in the midst of time, building websites with tables, and like functionality was pretty scarce. From there I ended up moving up to London, and worked at an agency there, back on the art working side of things, working with brands like Safeway and Badger Beers and Shell, that kind of thing, but still freelancing for the agency that I was with because they hadn't recruited someone else. So working all hours, but getting a taste for kind of doing my own thing and working directly with people. So when London didn't work out, I moved back with kind of a ready-made client as a freelancer, and it kind of started from there. So started kind of working with a few different agencies, just freelance web dev, and then convinced a friend of mine who was a designer to come on board and start doing stuff direct to clients, and Studio Republic was born. So that was 13 years ago now. And it kind of built in terms of client base of mostly local businesses. With one of the first we started working with was Tourism Southeast, who we still work with today. So that's probably a 13-year-old client, which is amazing that we've managed to retain them and still do work with them. And we built a very small team in Winchester. So there was myself, the creative director at the time, who was my business partner, and then an amazing new biz guy called Jack came on board with the aim of growing the business, and that started to happen, started to kick off. Then sadly at the time, my business partner decided that he didn't want to build an agency and left rather acrimoniously in the end. We won't dwell on that. But basically we had a week to figure out what to do with the business. So Jack stepped up, took on the role of partner in the business, and the business plan at the time was, as you can imagine, in a week was pretty scant. But the idea was, right, we're just going to go out and do the best work we possibly can with the best people that we can, with a smile on our face, and see what happens. And it was just a mind shift from actually, rather than worrying about the grind of it, let's just try and do things better. Let's try and build the best agency that we can. And the kind of version 2 of Studio Republic was born, and yeah, we haven't looked back. At the time we were still kind of doing all work for everyone. It was still quite local, but we worked with a couple of charities, and we found that the work for charities was so much more rewarding. Same skill set, same actual product, as we were designing and building websites, but actually the kind of the feels from doing those projects was completely different. They tended to be nicer people to deal with, like I say, more rewarding work. So we figured, actually, let's try and focus in a bit more on this and try and win more charities and try and pivot a little bit, which we did. Excuse me, dog getting involved. Then we kind of took a decision actually that that was going to be our purpose, is we're going to stop saying yes to purely commercial work and only deal with charities, not-for-profits, and businesses with purpose.
Yeah.
And again, that was another kind of sea change in the agency, that it became much clearer what we were about, what the mission was. It's quite bold that we were saying no to a whole load of business, and we were like regularly having to turn people away, but it was much clearer for everyone in the business what we were about, where we were heading, and yeah, we haven't looked back. It's completely changed everything.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think we'll touch upon a lot of that shortly, the current sort of state of the business, because it's something that I'm really interested in, and what you stand for. But just going back to the uni days, what was the reason for not being good at it? Was it just not interested? Was it just the social sort of side was just too inviting?
Yeah, it was. I was at Bournemouth Uni and living in Boscombe, and basically the beach and the pubs were closer than uni, and I was far too drawn into the social side of being a student rather than the studying side. So yeah, it wasn't for me. You know, academia doesn't suit everybody, and actually what I was motivated by was just doing stuff in the real world. As soon as I actually got out and started working, that was, you know, it was a much better motivator, having to support myself rather than having to learn academically. Like I say, it's different for everybody. You know, with hindsight and with the way things are now, you know, an apprenticeship would have been the way for me to go rather than purely doing the academic uni side of things.
What were the timelines of that, Chris? What dates were they roughly? So there's a sort of shift towards, like you said, mentioned about the internet sort of just started to break in.
Yeah, so I was doing, it was a software engineering degree I was doing, but we were learning like really, even then, outdated kind of stuff. So we were doing programming in Ada, programming, that having to learn binary multiplication and all that kind of stuff, which, you know, there was no real world application for, which is where I struggled. You know, I wanted to learn stuff that I'd actually be doing, and none of this seemed relevant at the time, so it just lost my interest. Whereas, you know, something like dev, I think you can learn a whole load at uni, and courses now, the digital courses that kind of we've been exposed to from taking on interns, that kind of thing, are so much better in terms of their vocational focus, and in terms of, you know, the lecturers that we've had contact with are, you know, are jobbing designers and developers as well as lecturers, so it's much more relevant than it used to be. So yeah, I wouldn't put anyone off going to uni, but it's certainly not the only way to get into this business at all.
And when you first stepped into work then for the printers, did you have any creative influences be influenced by anybody at that point, or was it just sort of just going straight as like your first experience of the creative world, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, that was it. We were producing print that other designers had worked on, so there wasn't the kind of creative input, but certainly having that exposure into the process was great, and I got a real taste then for the print. That was always my background, and it was great to see, you know, the work that I'd started, or, you know, sent off to run. I mean, this was back in the day, and we were running out films, and then the films would get exposed to the plates, and it was pretty old school. And camera artwork and onto bromides and that kind of thing. If anyone watching this is going to remember that.
I do.
You do? Oh, good. Not alone. But yeah, that whole process really interested me, and still does, although we do very little print these days because everything's gone digital. But yeah, that thing of taking a file and ending up being able to touch and sniff and feel a bit of print at the end of it was really cool. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think it was also, for me, because I did a very similar sort of experience, it was a learning of a craft within the industry. You know, it was, unless you were in a certain type of education or a certain agency, the sort of real understanding of design craft wasn't always there. It was very much, you know, trying to get things out as quickly as possible. So it was, you know, it was a bit of a feeling of sort of transaction or sort of design a lot of the time. You know, people needed things yesterday, but when it came to the print, you couldn't rush it. It was, you know, it was something that you know, and I think today it's when people do print, which is very rare, like you say, but I think they go down the route of nicer materials, print finishing, you know, foils, UVs, and all that sort of stuff. And it's still really a beautiful way of communicating if you've got the, you know, the budget or the client to do it. It still remains, doesn't it? But moving into like say the world of B&Q then, and that sort of fast-paced environment, was that a bit of a thrown into the fire sort of feeling?
Yeah, just a bit. And that was, you know, it was ridiculous turnarounds on stuff. So there was just, you know, the sheer quantity of artwork that was needed for like a new product range. But then there was also the big kind of reactionary stuff. So coming up to like Easter weekend. So today would have been ridiculous there because, you know, there's all the Easter offers. But then if there was wind that Home Base were doing a deal with Black & Decker, then suddenly B&Q would react. And then we'd be up all night artworking, sending stuff to print, and it was all 11th hour stuff. So yeah, the pace of that was just ridiculous.
How did that work in a literal process? Would you have somebody in marketing or someone higher up that just says, right, we need to do this. This is, you know, this is what the copy, this is the image, just put it together. Is it that sort of mentality?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we were working, there were kind of brand agencies that did the bigger stuff in terms of ads and collateral, whereas we were doing all the kind of in-store signage, shelf wobblers, tickets, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was crazy turnarounds. It was literally, you know, this is going out tomorrow and you've got 15 hours worth of artwork that needs to be done by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So there are a few literal all-nighters of sat there.
So in today's industry, where we talk about toxic workplaces a lot, we talk about, you know, workplace bullying and environments that are not conducive to creativity. Was that even a sort of anything that was raised at that point? Was it even thought about, or was it just this is what we've got to do and this is part of the?
You just got on with it. You just had to do it. I mean, I ended up leaving for the kind of benefit of my mental health because it did end up being quite a toxic environment. But you know, back then that wasn't really recognized as a thing. You just got on with the job or you left. And certainly the industry as it was then was all about, you know, you hit the deadlines no matter what. And if you're the person at the bottom of the pile artworking, then you're the one that's staying until 10, 11 o'clock at night to get the stuff out. Which obviously that was part of the kind of ethos of starting a business, was that we weren't going to run things like that. And you know, the buck has always stopped kind of with me and with Jack in terms of, you know, if there's stuff that needs to be done out of hours, it'll be me doing it. You know, we don't work overtime, we don't work weekends. You know, we very deliberately try and protect the team from that kind of environment, because you know, it's no good for anyone. That's how you get burnt out. That's how you get, you know, a stressed out team that ultimately aren't happy. And rightly so, they should leave from that sort of situation. But also, you know, it's not productive in the long run.
Yeah, I think from a lot of the people that I spoke to that are probably around our sort of age, is that's the biggest thing that most of us have learned, is now to create an environment which is the opposite of what a lot of us were experienced in at the time. Because it's only in hindsight, looking back, that you think, God, that must have been a lot worse than what I remember. What I do remember wasn't great, so that must have, you know, at the time it must have been a bit like, well, I suppose you just don't think about it, do you, too much? Like you say, you just get on with it because it's just the norm in those sort of places, and until you realise that there is a better side to it or another way of doing it, you'll never fully understand. Moving on to London, what wasn't or what didn't work for you in London?
Well, that was more of a kind of relationship breakdown of the person that I went up there with, and I had an amazing time in London. Really enjoyed the kind of London work culture. It was really sociable, had a really good time, but there wasn't really a reason to stay up there. I did my time up there for the best part of a year, but yeah, it's not somewhere that I could see myself living longer term. So
you're working there for companies like you mentioned, Safeways and Shell. takeaway is a bit of a blast from the past. Yeah, I've not heard that for a long time.
Again.
Yeah, and then you were also freelancing at the place you were working at previously. Still, so you're doing that on, in your spare time after hours.
So like a couple of hours a night, probably a day at the weekend. So yeah, I mean, I've never had so much money. it was very lucrative, but it also wasn't really conducive to long term.
Yeah.
But actually, the freelance side of things was building up that not living in London, I could support myself with it. So it just made sense to give it a go and see what happened and just jump in. The worst thing that would have happened is it wasn't enough and I could get another job. But actually it was great. And, working for myself at the time meant I had loads more freedom, had, a healthy income, could choose my own hours. So, as a freelancer, it was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So then that's the genesis of Studio Republic with your former partner. What was that? What were those? Something I really ask a lot of people are really interested in. What are those literal first moments like when you go, right, for anybody that's tuning in that might be thinking about starting out on their own or launching an agency or a one-man team? What did that look like for you? Was it comfortable because you knew you had a client already in place and that gave you the strength to do it? Or was it a case of, oh God, what are we going to do? How do we grow this? Or is it just day by day, just hoping for the best and just taking it as it came?
Yeah, it was never a leap, to be honest, because I had that initial client already. Yeah. And there was enough work coming from them to pay the bills. And actually at the time, digital was just massively on the increase. So more and more of the stuff they were doing was moving online. There was digital aspects to everything. I still had my hand in artwork. So, if there was any print stuff, I could take that on as well. So it was never a leap, to be honest. It was always, we were quite comfortable having that work to begin with. And then, as we grew, it grew quite naturally and quite organically. So until Jack came on board, we didn't have a new business function. Everything was coming from referral or from word of mouth. So as a lifestyle business, it was great because, we always had enough work to support ourselves and we were growing like very slowly, but like I say, organically. So there was never that big leap. I guess the bigger leaps have come more recently where we've decided actually we're going to have more of a growth strategy. So we're going to hire up in the team, we're going to bring in specialists. But even then, COVID aside, we've been really fortunate that we've had always a steady stream of work and really, really good relationships with existing clients that stick with us long term, and really good referrals from those because we've always tried our very best to keep clients happy.
Yeah, I think word of mouth is so overlooked, isn't it? It's so important in terms of you can plough as much finance as you want into campaigns, but yeah, the old cliches of people buy from people, or people trust people because of what other people have said. That's the same for every business, isn't it? And it's vital for growth.
Oh, absolutely. And trust is just so massively important for everything. We don't bullshit. We're always very, very honest with what we can do, what we can't do, what our specialisms are. Brutally honest sometimes when we're talking to some clients, when we have to kind of be the voice of doom in the room and say it's a nice idea, but actually, greatest respect, that's not going to work. But we can help you find a way that will work. And that's kind of our role in it, is to use our experience to get a positive outcome from a project, not just to take the money and run because client says they want to do something. So
yeah. So after your the relationship soured with your business partner, and you had that week to sort of basically go again, and sort of find the positivity to go. What did those 7 days really look like in terms of, from your perspective? Was it just it begins with darkness, I suppose, and then sort of you just try and find a positivity in it somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, it was frantic, kind of just handing over everything. We had who's still with us now, a senior designer now called Harley, who joined us as an intern. He was fundamental in that because he has very broad shoulders and just basically took on all the design work. and overnight went from kind of a junior designer to leading design, but absolutely stepped up like you wouldn't believe. Like I'd say he's probably the savior of it, in terms of like his ability just to cope with that extra responsibility was amazing. So yeah, we didn't really have time to think in that first week. It was pretty much just all hands to the pump, make sure we've got, you know, everything handed over as much as we can. But the change and that next Monday morning of just, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to be positive. We're just going to go out there with a smile on our face. Just instantly changed everything.
Do you feel like that was that like a weight off your shoulders then? It was the sort of
in a way.
relationship maybe been souring for a while, or been, you know, it'd been a little bit maybe negative.
There'd been that tension in that, you know, we deliberately brought Jack on board to help grow the business, but then having that conflict then within the two of us to say, you know, I wanted to push on and build an agency. He wanted to stay put and just be a designer. That was pretty tough thing to overcome. But like I say, the relief then to just say, okay, there's two of us now running the business with the exact same mentality was brilliant. I mean, that's everything. That, you know, you've got to all be pulling in the same direction.
Yeah.
Have kind of conflict in leadership, then it's just a recipe for disaster. So luckily, you know, we've over however many years it's been now, quite a few years, we've stayed aligned, and you know, we've only kind of strengthened that mission and that kind of direction for the agency, which is brilliant. You know, it's great to know that we are still on the same page, and you know, we can disagree about things, but we disagree very openly and honestly with each other, and we find resolutions to it. You know, there's nothing that kind of simmers along and doesn't get said.
So that version 2 then, was that, have you set out a series of principles or an ethos, that like a much more of a something to shoot for all the time, and that's what you strive to achieve, or is it something?
Yeah, initially it was just let's do good work for good people. Then, you know, we adapted that kind of into the brand for the agency. So we coined the term creative for good. Before, I have to say, lots of other agencies started using it, which was, you know, it's good to be one of the first, but also when you see it popping up everywhere, it's like, damn, that's our shtick. So that was kind of what we started pinning everything on, is like, you know, we've got our skills, we want to use them and put them to good use rather than just making money. Not that we weren't making money, and there's, you know, there's no shame in having a profitable agency that works for charities. You know, that's, you know, the two don't have to conflict with each other. You can make money and do good, which, you know, I think we're proving, you know, in terms of the growth of the agency.
Yeah, I think different statuses of businesses, that I think people sometimes misconceive that with giving all your profit away, or, you know, doing things just for good in terms of a social cause. But that's not always the case. You still pay staff, you still pay yourself, you know, you still need to invest in the company to move forward, but it's what you do with making the excessive profits, isn't it?
And actually, you know, the growth of the agency means that we can work with more clients, which means that we can help those clients do more things. And when you're in that kind of for good arena, it means that, you know, our growth is, you know, an increase in impact as well as an increase in profit. And kind of impact is where we measure everything in terms of the agency. It's how we qualify clients, it's how we measure the success of a project. You know, not does a new website look good or has it made us lots of money. It's, you know, if it's a charity, has that actually provided an increase in donations, an increase in fundraising, you know, that kind of thing. It's impact is everything for us.
Yeah. And the movement towards solely working with charities, was that a very conscious decision, or did that lead from working with a charity, for instance, and then the experience made you think, actually, we'd like to replicate this and do it time and time again? Yeah,
it was so it's never been 100% charities. So we've always had an eye on the kind of slightly wider market, just not to completely pigeonhole ourselves. So, you know, we do deal with businesses, but they have to have a purpose. There has to be, you know, a positive impact from that business. Yeah, I mean, we'd worked with a few charities kind of over the years, and it was just that different feeling that you get, you know, having come from a background of working with corporates where, you know, you might do some really good work and it puts, you know, a point of a penny on a share price. That's great. Whereas actually when you get evidence back from having worked with a charity that the work that we've done has had like a positive impact on their income, that's you know, it's a completely different feeling that you get from it, that, you know, everyone in the agency loves. Everyone, you know, is bought into the whole ethos of making positive impact with what we do. So yeah, it's game changing. Once you get a feel for it, it would be really hard to go back to just taking every bit of work that comes through the door. You know?
Yeah, is it a similar sort of process working for a charity as it would be for a corporate? Is there a different sort of level of empathy, or, you know, a different structure that you put in place to help them?
Yeah, I mean, it is different. You have different processes internally in terms of dealing with stakeholders. So some charities will have a big board that everything has to go through. So sometimes you can't be as agile as you would be with a corporate. But, you know, fundamentally, it's the same skill set. You know, it's you know, we deal in brand and design and in build, and actually it's the process is fundamentally the same. But, you know, you're getting someone through a donation funnel rather than an e-commerce conversion funnel. But, you know, ultimately the skills are the same. They're completely transferable. Obviously, you need that knowledge of the third sector to be able to really understand the clients that you're working with, and, you know, how they operate, which, you know, there's that learning curve with it. But yeah, ultimately it's the same skills, but with, you know, much more positive outcome from
yeah. You couldn't ask for much more, really, could you? When you say it like that, it just makes sense, doesn't it? So
yeah, totally.
why would you want to do the opposite? You guys are BCorp, aren't you? What was that? Is what you've just mentioned the driving factor behind that? And secondly, what was that process like? And is it a difficult one for you, or was there anything that you had to do specific to sort of get to that stage?
Yeah, so we were kind of touting ourselves as an ethical and a sustainable agency, but we were starting to get questions on it. So what do you mean?
Yeah.
What's a sustainable agency? What's an ethical business? So we wanted to put our money where our mouth was and actually have it basically audited and prove that we were. So we were looking at all sorts of different accreditations. We had an amazing designer working with us at the time called Helena, who was very big on sustainability, and she brought BCorp to us saying, look, this would be amazing if we could do it. So we set out blindly, just saying, okay, well, you know, we're ethical, we're sustainable. How hard can it be? It's very hard. It took a long time. Not because we weren't, but because we didn't have the evidence to back it up. And, you know, BCorp is the process is self-assessment. So you have to go through, you know, your own assessment questionnaire. And it's very easy just to go and tick boxes and say, oh yeah, we do this, we do that, but you have to back it all up. So, you know, you need to have the policies in place to prove that you are a fair employer, that you do care about the environment, that you've got a view to the future and that kind of thing. So it took a long time, but so worth it. That, you know, it meant that we now have, you know, we have something to back it up, and we've also got something to work for, because it's not static. You do have to reassess, and, you know, you should always be looking for an increase in that overall score. Otherwise, you know, you're not moving forward. So there's always that push to do better and to improve, which, you know, is great. And I think, you know, the BCorp pass grade should really be the minimum that any business operates to, not this kind of gold standard. It should really be the de facto that, you know, everyone puts people and planet before profit.
Yeah, I presume it's difficult, or maybe not difficult, just it's a long process, because otherwise people could just do it for to look good or for popularity purposes. But have you noticed anything from that? Not I don't mean that in the sense of if you gained work from that, but has it driven conversations? Has it allowed people to sort of really understand what you are a bit easier? Because it's become a lot more common, isn't it? There's a lot more conversations being had about BCorp and other status.
Totally. I mean, when we first had the accreditation, it was, you'd have to explain what BCorp was, which then took quite a big part of that conversation. Whereas now, yeah, I mean, it's everywhere, and it's great that it is, because people recognize that as a mark of a business that cares. So yeah, we don't have to explain what BCorp is. We do still go into it in terms of what it means for us. Not being a business that consumes a huge amount of energy or employs a huge amount of people, our kind of direct impact is smaller than someone like Unilever going for BCorp, for example. But it's something that every business can aim towards. And even if you're not going to go for accreditation, the actual impact assessment is free for any business. And what it very quickly does is exposes gaps and holes in business practice, and loads of those are really easy things to fix. It doesn't need to be a massive onerous project. You can do it kind of piece by piece, make improvements as you go, and then when you've got everything into place, go through the actual assessment and accreditation process. But yeah, there's so many things that are easy to fix that every business can do.
Yeah, I suppose those assessments are essential just to help you, even if you don't end up going or get the award immediately. It allows you just to understand what yourself and where you're going wrong, or what you can improve on. That's vital for any business, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
I'm interested in the idea that outward facing to attract clients, or just to sort of talk about the businesses, everything that we mentioned, flip that around onto the inside of the agency and the way that you operate as a business. When we were talking about earlier about well-being, toxic cultures, I know you do 4-day week, and through your socials I've spotted a lot of things for the team, doing things like fundraising and social good of their own. Is that also something that you're heavily involved in, driving that message, that it's not just done for show, it's not just done as a good way to generate revenue or work or clients, etc. It's something that actually, as a team, you are genuinely passionate about?
Yeah, and culture is everything to us, and we've gone as far as that a massive part of Jack's remit, as well as being the MD and looking after new business and finance, a big part of his role is team culture and well-being. So it's something that we take massively seriously, and it's something we feel responsible. If we create a negative atmosphere for somewhere that people are spending 30 plus hours a week in, then that's on us. And what we're really conscious of as a business is that invariably there's going to be negative impact along the way of running a business. You're going to consume energy. At times staff are going to be stressed because we've had late changes to a project, or there's bugs on something. So there's inevitably pressure that comes from working in digital, but it's our job as the owners of the agency to try and minimize that as much as we possibly can. So yeah, team well-being is hugely important, and life's stressful enough without your job contributing to that. So it should be that going to work is rewarding and is a pleasure, which hopefully we're doing. And again, that's something that we look at improving constantly within the business, to make sure that we are supporting people properly, and that everyone is happy and motivated, because
and that must reflect on the work, surely, let alone just the culture and the environment and just the way people are mentally, physically. That must reflect on what you then produce. The end output has to just be just a complete bringing all that into a piece of design, isn't it?
Yeah, and the team is everything, right? Me and Jack can't do this on our own, and so we're obviously completely reliant on the guys that work for us, but everyone has that shared passion, and everyone feels like every bit of work we do has a purpose and does contribute positively. So yeah, everyone puts their absolute all into everything. You know, we try and produce better work with each project that we do and have better impact. So to have the whole team brought in on that mission and pulling in the same direction is amazing.
Yeah.
So
The 4 days a week concept,
mhm.
I've read a lot about, but I've never actually spoken to anyone directly about it. How did that come about, and were there any, did you have exposure to it before? Were you nervous about it? How did that sort of, when you implement that really in the real world, work?
Yeah, so it was a big step. So we did a huge amount of research into it. We had a few friends in other agencies who trialed it and who were doing it. So they'd made lots of mistakes along the way, so we could learn from them about, you know, how it would actually work in an agency environment. We shifted the working hours ever so slightly, so we start a bit earlier, we finish ever so slightly later. But actually, when you factor in the fact that we're completely remote and no one's commuting, actually your work day, if you take traveling out, is still loads shorter than it was pre-COVID. But yeah, I mean, we're trialing it at the moment. We're doing 6 months from January, and we'll review it. But actually, in terms of productivity, it's the same, if not better. We're getting as much done in 4 days as we were in 5. Everyone's a lot more focused on getting through work. We've had to put a lot more kind of processes in place, more touch points to make sure that things are on track. But the idea of, you know, getting to the end of Thursday and your weekend starts is amazing. I can't I wouldn't want to go back. And, you know, there's not a business reason for going back now, because, you know, it's working so well for us.
And that concept of the productivity is the same. How do you evaluate that in like from within? Is it just sort of like what's been achieved in the 4 days is the same as what we achieved in 5 days, or is it just people are more energized, people are more excited because they've had a long weekend, etc.?
Yeah, it's that entirely. You know, when you start Monday morning feeling a lot more relaxed and energized, then you get through more work naturally. So, you know, there's no more whip cracking that goes on now than ever has. It's just, you know, you've got more energy to start the week with because you've had 3 days off.
Yeah,
it's such an antiquated idea that
you
know, you work 5 days on and 2 days off. You know, it's a Victorian idea of, you know, people working in factories and whatnot, with one person at home running the house and the other person out working. That, you know, we don't live like that anymore. You know, so why work patterns are still the same as they were 100 years ago is crazy. You know, so, you know, I haven't heard of a business that's massively suffered from it. Obviously, we had to tread carefully with clients to say, you know, that we're not going to be available on the Friday, which, you know, when it comes to project work and scheduling meetings, it just means that, you know, it gets scheduled slightly differently. Being a digital agency, obviously, we do support websites, so we still do have to make sure that any outages are covered off. So that's kind of, I hold that card in terms of dealing with any kind of urgent bugs or failures that happen, but touch wood, haven't been called in on a Friday too many times. But yeah, I mean, it's just being really, really clear and just setting out. And actually, having done it, there's quite a few clients that are starting to consider it themselves because they've seen it working with us. So
yeah, I think a lot of the time I've noticed more, probably since COVID, is this obsession with sort of making yourself busy for a lot of the time of relevant reasons. And if you scrapped a lot of that, you'd end up with so much free time anyway. That, you know, you can put it in so much more productive areas. That you know, it's you know, this idea of having to be on social media every 5 minutes, or having to be at the end of an email the second it lands, sort of type things. And I fall into that habit all the time of responding immediately because I just sort of get used to it. But you know, you realise that you don't need to be emailing at 8 o'clock at night because that person's not there anyway, and all these sorts of things. I think you just add to this storm of making yourself feel a bit conscious about always being there because you're going to lose work, or you know, your team's going to think you're slacking or something like that. So it's most of it's self-made, isn't it?
yeah, totally. And you know, busy isn't always productive.
No, no, far from it.
Just
Yeah. Yeah, it's always the way that you just lose yourself in it. But quickly before we come towards the end, Chris, I just wanted to bring to you about the sort of refresh you had, or rebrand. Is that is it as complete as a whole rebrand, or did you just, from an identities perspective, was that just a level up with the sort of philosophy that you were now working towards?
no, that was a proper process that we went through. So we brought in a strategist, and we just basically ripped everything apart and started again right from the ground up. It wasn't a massive change in attitude of the business, because it's where we were heading, but in terms of defining a clearer brand strategy, of actually defining our values, our tone of voice, we did it properly, which we had to bring someone in to do it, because as an agency ourselves, we never would have got round to it. So we needed someone getting paid to actually focus the mind and force us to do it. It still took a huge amount of time, because doing any work for yourself always comes second fiddle. So it took a long time to roll it out, but it was great to have that kind of that clean sweep and a much clearer mission to go out there with. And it's helped massively in being able to define that proposition when we are talking to new for good clients. That means that we are talking the talk and walking the walk, and it's very clear now what we're about.
I thought that really stood out when I was looking at the site when we first started talking to each other a while ago with Laura. It was sometimes look at websites, just get an idea of the type of work that people create, of just the output. You don't really always hear or read anything about the actual people behind it. And it seemed really nice to have that bit of the flip side, where it was much more about what you stand for, and much more. It was concise but informative enough to sort of get a picture of it before you then sort of get bombarded with portfolios and the work. It's sort of that sort of side of design sometimes, because there's so much great stuff, I don't think is always that relevant. But seeing the output of the work of people, it's about what they're built upon and what their ethos. And that was a very strong part of the process for you to sort of immediately inform people what you're all about.
Yeah, 100%. And we haven't got it completely right. We're still iterating on it, and as usual, it's our own website, so it's it's a bit behind in terms of its updates, which I think every agency is guilty of, that you neglect your own stuff. Luckily, we've got Laura on board now, who's our marketing manager, who's pushing things forward in terms of getting the brand out there more. So yeah, there will be lots of updates coming to the website, but yeah, it's really important that the ethos is front and center, because that's that is the brand, if you like, is our attitude and our mission. So yeah, before we get into work, it's important to say what we stand for, and actually that instantly filters out anyone that's coming from a purely commercial angle. So we don't have to have those awkward conversations to say, actually we don't want to work with you, because
and even though you work towards doing good things, socially responsible, working with charities and people that are trying to improve the world, I suppose ultimately that's like a USP, isn't it? That's really differentiates you from 20 other agencies that people might be looking at, is that you do have that you do have that thing that sort of makes you unique to maybe the competition. Or it's not always necessarily the way to look at it, but it does give a clear indication of what you stand for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it resonates with the sort of people that we want to work with, which is great. That's ultimately what it's there for, is to bring the right people to the door. So it's certainly doing its job that way.
Yeah, and that's testament to the idea that the old adage that a brand is a logo, or just a fancy website. It's built on so much more substance than that.
Yeah, totally. It's everything. It's it's how we communicate internally, externally. It's our attitude to work. It's everything. Like you say, when you hear, oh yeah, we want a rebrand, and what we actually want is a new logo. It's not brand. Brand is every single touch point of the business. So yeah, it's much more.
Super. Well, that's I told you to go fast. That's 45 minutes, and very, very quick. I really appreciate your time, Chris. It's like with everybody we've been speaking to, it's so good to sort of hear the story. You see so much of from the from the exterior, you see, the work or the clients that people are associated with, but don't always get to know about the people behind that. And I find it fascinating to understand people's journeys and how to sort of how they've got to where they are. And I hope anybody that tunes into this in future will sort of be inspired by that too, as I am. So it's great to speak to you. I hope you have a great week off.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we'll have to catch up again and soon and get you involved in some future different themes and collections that we're doing next year.
Yeah, totally.
Brilliant. Have a great rest of day, weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Nice one. Cheers, Chris.
Take care, mate. Ta-da.
Yeah.